It's Tuesday, November 26th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast presented by Spectrum. And it is a hell of a day to talk ball. Before we dive into the People's Panic Meter, the Coping Corner, all the players that you need to target off the waiver wire with Dalton Del Don heading into Week 13. Like we do here on every Tuesday show, I'm going to give you a solo Monday Night Football recap. We've got Ravens 30, Chargers 23, the Hardball Bowl. This one felt like it was going to get really interesting early, where the Chargers had a 10-0 lead, but ultimately the Ravens recaptured the lead 14-10 on a Rashad Bateman touchdown with 32 seconds left in the half. God, doesn't that just roll off the tongue? A Rashad Bateman 40-yard touchdown to regain the lead that they never gave back. That was electric. So let's start with the Ravens here on this one. I mean, it's a Chargers defense that's been good this year. You know, we talked about this kind of in the matchup show, how this was a group that played really well on defense basically all year. It was a defense that I think has been pretty impressive, and the way they've done things was admirable. You know, they didn't dedicate a lot of resources to stop the run. They play with some light bodies against the run, and for the most part, they've been able to slow down some inferior rushing attacks. They haven't allowed a lot of from a success rate standpoint and EPA per play standpoint, they've been a pretty good run defense, especially early in the year. Lately, a few cracks have started to show up, especially when they go against some rushing attacks that can produce some big plays. Well, no running game in the NFL produces big plays quite like the Baltimore Ravens. We had a 51-yard touchdown run from Justice Hill. We had a touchdown run that was electric by Lamar Jackson, where he kind of did a little encore from his viral high school rushing touchdown. If you haven't seen it yet, it's all over social media. I'm sure you can find it. And of course, Derrick Henry, 140 yards on 24 carries. This was a bad matchup for the Chargers defense. There's no question about that with this run game in particular. If they were not going to change their stripes, the Chargers defense, and dedicate extra bodies to the run, they were going to be in trouble. They didn't do it. For the most part, they just played coverage on the back end, and they didn't dedicate those extra bodies to the run, and the Ravens made them pay for it. That was absolutely something you could have seen coming to this game if the Chargers didn't change their defensive approach. In the passing game, I mentioned that 40-yard touchdown to Rashad Bateman. Another thing I highlighted in my preview column, and I think Tara and I talked about this on the podcast as well, Rashad Bateman leads the team in yards per route run against two high coverages because Lamar Jackson is just comfortable throwing it between the safeties, or between the safety and the underneath corner, to Rashad Bateman on those plays. And that's exactly what we saw there. Beautiful touchdown catch by Rashad Bateman. If Bateman's just going to ball out in primetime games and that's it, I'm happy with that. I love Rashad Bateman. This is great to see from him. Awesome stuff overall. Good game from the Ravens passing game. Mark Andrews scores a touchdown as well. What the hell was that ref looking at? I mean, I know what he was looking at. He was looking at Mark Andrews scoring a touchdown. But what the hell did he think he saw on that play to wave no catch at the beginning there? But anyways, Andrews gets home with a touchdown here. He is not going to be put in the coping corner, even though that's going to be discussed later on in the podcast. Andrews has been just fine from a fantasy tight end perspective. And Zay Flowers, 8 targets, leads the team here. A couple of misses downfield by Lamar, a couple missed plays by Zay Flowers as well. But for the most part, Flowers is having a pretty good season, so nothing to worry about there. This was, again, a bad matchup for the Chargers defense to go against this offense. This offense can put many good defenses in a bind. So this was a good rebound spot for the Ravens. They hit it out of the park. Good stuff here. 30 points overall for them, and really the 23 points on the Chargers side. Last second kind of touchdown here, very late touchdown by Gus Edwards with 50 seconds left. This game really was 30-16 for a minute here in the fourth quarter, 23-16 too before Justice Hill ripped off that 51-yard touchdown. This is a game where, look, I love the Chargers. I've been very upfront about the fact that I've enjoyed this Chargers team. I've thought they've been fun to watch on both sides of the ball. You can feel the Jim Harbaugh effect. You can see they're getting a lot more out of Justin Herbert from an aggressiveness perspective. The guy is for sure more willing to throw the ball downfield than at any point during the Joe Lombardi, Kellen Moore offensive era there in LA. This team just plays harder and more disciplined, I think, than the Brandon Staley units. To me, it's just a more enjoyable product. This is the type of football I like to watch. However, this is a night where you also felt the lack of personnel, the lack of teeth on the offensive side of the football in particular. Herbert had his misses downfield. There's no question. You can nitpick a few throws. That is absolutely true. But I'm not saying he played flawless football tonight, but there were strong portions of this game where he was pitching absolute heat. And there were equal portions of this game where his perimeter receivers just could not make a play for him. I know Ladd McConkey came into this game with an injury, so maybe that's why he felt slightly limited. I'm going to try to look up I know the full playing time data is not going to be available, but on the fly here, I'll try to pull up what we have so far. Again, he came into this game with an injury. Maybe that's why he was not fully reliant on from a target perspective. Just 6 targets. Well, he caught all 6 of them for 83 yards. He's good. I mean, Ladd McConkey is awesome. He looks like a real deal, just stud at the receiver position. Is he a future one? I don't know, but he's a great player. I think he's just on a rocket ship trajectory. He should be featured even more. Looking at the data I've got right now, he was second on the team in routes run behind Quentin Johnston. Let's talk about Quentin Johnston. Dude. What a mess. What a mess for Quentin Johnston in this game. Source. Let me step back there. Source I'm looking at now has Ladd McConkey is actually the team leader in routes on this game. So I don't know. I guess there wasn't that much limitations on him, but he probably should have been featured more in the game plan because the passes to Quentin Johnston did not work. 5 targets, 0 catches. I don't know how many of those players are going to get charted as drops, but there's going to be a lot of them. He had issues. He was clearly in his head again. It felt like rookie year Quentin Johnston all over again. If like the box score bros and the points per game bros have been hard on this, hey, Quentin Johnston's back. All right, he's having a great year. He's useful now, guys. And let's not go too far on this whole thing. I think Quentin Johnston is a guy that you can maybe count on as your wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. Last year, he wasn't even playable. Okay. So this is a nice little rebound for him, but he is not a starting caliber wide receiver. I'm not that big of a fan of Josh Palmer either, who I think left some plays on the field at the catch point too. Maybe not just to the same type of soul crushing outright drops as Quentin Johnston, but I don't think Palmer's necessarily a starting receiver. Wideout's going to be a pretty big need for the Chargers in the offseason. They have to figure out a way to get a better player there over a guy like Johnson, who maybe could, again, be your 3. I think Josh Palmer could maybe be a 3. Maybe you rotate those guys a little bit, but they need somebody that can operate at the X receiver position and truly consistently beat press man coverage and make plays when the football arrives. They do not have that guy right now. The 2 best players in the Chargers passing game, or should I say the 2 most consistent players in the Chargers passing game, are still Ladd McConkey and Will Dissly. Dissly 4 for 47, whatever. At the tight end position, you're going to take that. Ladd McConkey, though, still every week starter. The trajectory is screaming up. I think he's going to be a great player for a long time in this league. He checks so many boxes for me, and some of the plays that he made in this game they were clutch, they were needed, and I wanted to see more of them. That was disappointing from the Chargers passing game that we didn't see more Ladd McConkey. In the run game, got to monitor this J.K. Dobbins injury. He left before the second half before the first half actually ended. He went into the locker room with a knee injury. He did not return to the game and was ruled out in the third quarter. So after 6 carries for 40 yards in his revenge game against the Ravens, just hope. I don't know. Again, as I'm sitting here recording right now, I don't have any news on this. I'm just crossing my fingers. It's nothing super serious for J.K. Dobbins because that would be a real bummer, especially against his former team, for his season to end. Chargers are good. I think they're probably a playoff team, but you saw that there's a gap between the top teams in the AFC and them tonight. More Ladd McConkey, please. Just more Ladd McConkey. That's what I want to see out of this Chargers offense going forward. Hopefully he can be 100% healthy and we can see him featured more because I think this guy has a really, really high ceiling going forward, and I want to see more of it. All right. With that, let's get to the rest of the show with Dalton Del Don. Let's get into the coping corner, the People's Panic Meter. All that coming up. Let's get into it. Joining us now, as he does every week here on Tuesday for the People's Panic Meter, the coping corner, all those good things, is my good pal Dalton Del Don. Dalton, what's going on, buddy?
What's up, Harmon? Looking forward to Thanksgiving week. I became a great uncle for the 8th time over the weekend, which is pretty wild. I know I'm old here, not as old as Andy Behrens, but yeah, for someone my age, it's pretty wild. For the 8th time, a great uncle. And I don't mean like through different, I mean, same both sides, no marriage or anything. I even have a great nephew who's in the 7th grade who actually outweighs me. So that's kind of a fun fact for me. I have a very much older siblings.
I mean, yeah, you just blew my mind. I think I knew you had older siblings. I also have, I have 2 older sisters as well. Like they're, well, I'm not gonna say much older than me, but they are older than me. So yeah, I mean, I'm not quite great uncle territory yet, but especially not an 8-time great uncle. But shout out to you, Dalton. That's big for the fam.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Shout out to my nephew, Tyler, who had his first kid over the weekend. And yeah. Better to think of that than the Niners disaster, Harmon. I'll tell you that much.
I mean, if you want to continue to talk about your family lineage and make Andy Behrens old jokes, I'm totally fine to do that for the rest of the pod. But I feel like Colin and the listeners too would maybe not really enjoy us doing that. But yeah, let's just move into it. We will get to the Niners at some point, but we have to address the coping corner before we get into our People's Panic Meter submissions. And we have some really good ones to get into, some ones that really deserve some unpacking here. But let's talk through Coping Corner before we move in. Remember, this is the Thanksgiving edition. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see some pretty sweet graphics for this one. These are our cooked Coping Corner candidates. Do we want to pull anybody out of the oven here before they get fully cooked here on Thanksgiving week? We've got Aaron Rodgers. We've got Nick Chubb. We've got Patrick Mahomes and Xavier Worthy. We've got Sam Laporta. We've got Javonte Williams, Jalen Waddle coming off a big game. We have the entire Chicago Bears offense, passing offense specifically, I believe. The entire Dallas Cowboys offense, Deontay Johnson and CJ Stroud. Now, Dalton, I'm going to let you decide if there are any players you want to pull out of the cooked coping corner here on Thanksgiving week. But before I throw it to you, just remember, folks, what the coping corner is. We are not saying, you can't start any of these players in fantasy football. The coping corner is simply, you're not allowed to panic about these players because you are accepting the reality of their situation. That is important to remember. As I throw it to you, Dalton, do any of these players need to come out of the coping corner heading into week 13?
I won't necessarily argue for them, but I'll throw 2 nominees would be Patrick Mahomes. I think he has 3 TD passes in 3 of his last 4 games. Their pass rate over expectation is ticking up. But at the same time, it's kind of been more of the same, benefited from facing the Panthers last week. Like I said, I wouldn't argue too hard there. And then the other is Jalen Waddle, who finally had a breakout week. He had almost as many yards this week as he had over his previous 5 games combined, almost caught a touchdown as well. That said, there was no real change in his first read target share. But on the other hand, Miami's offense is looking great. Tyreek Hill still doesn't look the same. So, I mean, I could see an argument for Waddle, but it's just one game, and it's just been such a disaster leading up to that.
Yeah, it's tough because you're right. Jonnu Smith still led the Dolphins in first read targets, and he should continue to, by the way. Those Jonnu plays are really, really good. That's not something that's going to change. And that's the tough part with Waddle, is that I think that there was nothing really about his skill set or something with him as a player that was the reason for this statistical decline. It was just the lack of opportunities. And I don't know, Dalton, I'm just not too convinced that we're going to be sitting here on Thursday night, Thanksgiving, after we're all stuffed, and we're not getting stuffed with Jalen Waddle's stats. I think that we might see another 5 target game from him, and I wouldn't be surprised by that.
Yeah, it took 40 pass attempts for Tua. That's why he got the targets raised. It wasn't like his percentage rose. So his role in the offense remained the same. So he's going to have spike weeks. It shouldn't take anyone by surprise that he had a good week. But like I said, I wouldn't fight to take him off this. I think all those players pretty much should remain.
Even the Bears offense, because
that's fine.
That's the one that I might want to consider here, but I'm curious to hear your take. Everyone else, I think, should stay coping corner. Even the Cowboys, we're getting the PPR scam for CeeDee Lamb, but still, if he somehow has 2 catches for 30 yards against the Giants on Thursday, I don't think you're allowed to panic about that. I think you just be like, damn, that's the price of doing business sometimes with Cooper Rush at quarterback. But with the Bears offense, since we put their entire passing game in the coping corner, we have gotten an offensive coordinator change. Thomas Brown has taken over for Shane Waldron. And just real quick before I continue my thought there, the offense has just looked much better with Thomas Brown as the play caller, the offensive coordinator here with Shane Waldron out of the building. If you're what was Thomas Brown doing all year? Was he just constantly Shane Waldron's coming up with these game plans because specifically the protection plan has been so much better, I think, the last 2 weeks against Brian Flores and the blitz happy Minnesota Vikings defense. Caleb Williams is only pressured on like 10% of his dropbacks, depending on the source that you look at. The protection plan is so much better under Thomas Brown. Was he just constantly listening to Shane Waldron putting things out there and be like, good God, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. But hey, there's a hierarchy here. There's a corporate org chart going on in the Bears coaching staff. I'll just stay in my lane or whatever, because it's clear he just has better ideas about what this offense should look like. It's also clear that Caleb Williams likes playing for Thomas Brown much better than he liked playing for Shane Waldron. So the Bears are still 0-2. It's not been perfect, but Williams has looked much more like the quarterback that we thought the last 2 weeks as opposed to what was going on in the Waldron offense.
Yeah, that pass to Swift this last week was sick. And unfortunately, the Shane Fraudrin moniker looks even more apt after him leaving these 2 games. I mean, just a simple change in game plan to DJ Moore. 9 screens over the last 2 weeks. 9 screens, 9 receptions, 117 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, it has been noticeable, and the coaching changes dramatically helped this offense. So I could see if you want to fight for the Bears. That is one where after I said it, I'm like, I guess with the difference there's been some positive steps. For sure, the sacks have gone down. Mm-hmm. Adunze still, tantalizes, and then we get 15 targets from Allen. But man, all those condensed targets, how many? 3 Bears had double-digit targets, including Keenan's 15. So for fantasy-wise, actually, you love to see that. So okay, I'm okay if you want to remove them.
I think let's take them out. Of course, then they're going to get smoked on Thanksgiving. So maybe we
can face
the
Lions.
we have to face the Lions, and that's a tough defense to go against. But man,
that's what we did with my guy Richardson. We pulled him right before he had to face one of the league's best defenses. So let's do the same. Let's offer the same courtesy to Caleb Williams. See how he does against the Lions.
I think that's fair, especially since, what was it, a few podcasts ago? You're like, who's going to have the better NFL career? Caleb Williams, Anthony Richardson. Yeah, we got to do the same here. Let's pull the Bears passing game out, mostly because I did think we got to a point where you couldn't even consider starting a guy like DJ Moore, somebody that you took in the 3rd, 4th round of your fantasy draft. And yeah, I think we're past that now. I think we can play DJ Moore. I think we can play these guys, and even Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze are probably going to eat into each other a little bit. Like, I think only one of those guys probably going to have like a useful game per week, but still, that's okay. I mean, you can at least start one of them without being embarrassed by doing it. And Andy said this on the recap show. I think Williams is at least on the radar, certainly for Superflex leagues now.
And then conversely, we had only the passing offense on there because we felt comfortable with DeAndre Swift, but he's losing all the goal line work to Roschon Johnson. So he's almost more concerning than the passing offense at this point.
It's a good point. Weirdly, haven't heard any complaints about him the last couple of weeks. Certainly not in the Panic Meter episode. Maybe because people thought, the entire Bears offense. But yeah, so we'll take the Bears passing offense out of the coping corner, but everybody else remains, and I feel pretty good about that. All right, with that, let's fire up the post-Week 12 People's Panic Meter.
Would you say it's time for everyone to panic?
Yes, I would, Kent.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening! No! Wait! Everybody stay calm! Stay calm! What's the procedure? Stay calm!
Reminder how this works. We've got 4 designations for the Panic Meter. We've got no panic, some panic, total panic, and coping corner. Maybe we'll have a few folks ready to join those names in the coping corner after our submissions this week. We've got a few emails to run through here. 2 of them on the same player. Let's talk about Jonathan Taylor, Colts running back. Randy B sent in a pretty straightforward email on Jonathan Taylor. He says, has he been demoted to the Colts running back too? Because the last 2 weeks, 20 carries, 93 yards, 2 touchdowns for Anthony Richardson, 35 carries, 92 yards, 0 touchdowns for Jonathan Taylor. Of course, Anthony Richardson is not a running back. He is a quarterback, but he's certainly been the more productive rusher for the Colts the last few weeks, which I found surprising, Dalton, because I thought the one thing we could confidently say was, Richardson's presence helps out the run game, even if the passing game is a little shakier. Well, that has not been the case with the last 2 games worth of a sample here.
Yeah, entering last week, though, Taylor was the RB30 in 2 games with Flacco and was the RB8 and scored all 5 of his touchdowns in 6 games with Richardson. And then last week they faced the Lions, who were entered 2nd in the league in EPA per play defensively. So there's some concern just in general, the Colts offense with Richardson, and they continuously get tough matchups, it seems like every week. Finally, maybe a reprieve against a reeling New England D. With Richardson, you're going to get fewer targets, but I wouldn't worry about how many rushes the quarterback has unless he's stealing them at the goal line. But yeah, where do you stand with Taylor? I think in general, it was just a tough matchup, and he gets a lot of work in the red zone still, even with Richardson there. So, I mean, you can have some panic because Taylor's not living up to expectations. But to me, that was just the last week, tough matchup. In general, I'd actually rather Richardson starting than Flacco for the rush success rate.
Yeah, I think the reason that people are maybe more than some panicked is just the performance of other running backs this year, which Hannah sends in this email, brutal email about Jonathon Taylor. Says, greetings from New Zealand. As I watched Saquon run rampant on Sunday night, I found myself thinking back to the draft when I reached down for JT and skipped over Saquon as my first pick overall because I was a coward. Absolutely shameful behavior, as JT got me a cool 3.5 points this week, and I thought he was going to be my hero RB. I'm skirt. I realize as I'm writing this that I'm just looking for some copium at this point, so I'll see myself out. Taking up residence in the coping corner, Hannah. Yeah, I feel like you have to put yourself into coping corner maybe if you took Jonathon Taylor over Saquon Barkley, over Derrick Henry. You know, even if you can say the process, the results suck. I mean, it's tough. I'm with Hannah. I understand that. But overall, you know, I mean, I think I'm only at some panic too, I think, because the Colts offense has played much better. Like you said, we got a matchup with the New England Patriots here this week. That should be a pretty good one. I'm interested to see what the receiver usage looks like if Josh Downs misses this game. But yeah, I think for Taylor, probably not a full panic for me. I think just some panic because he has not played well the last couple of games, but we do have a long history with him being much more productive with Richardson under center.
So funny you were a donkey if you took the younger back, man. You got to get the older guys, Henry, Barkley, Mixon. It's all about the aging running backs is clearly the targets in fantasy football these days. All right, man, I'll be remiss if we didn't talk a little Richardson here. Is this like they're playing a practical joke on me? Yes, he missed an 88-yard potential touchdown to wide open Pierce, but 80 yards of yards wiped away by penalties, a couple by your guy Josh Downs, one a highly questionable OPI. Ashton Doolin and A.D. Mitchell couldn't get both feet in bounds on would-be long gains. Alec Ogletree suffered a brutal drop in the end zone. That Lions defense has allowed one quarterback touchdown over the last 4 games, just so we're clear on that opponent. Richardson had the 5th highest passing grade this week, according to PFF. It's like a repeat, and I'm just like, I'm making excuses. It's a joke, but that all really happened again. Like that all really happened. It's frustrating, but what a year it's been for him.
He's a great example of why, one, you shouldn't just look at the box score. It's so funny. We've been obsessed with completion percentages here. I thought we all moved past completion percentages like a real deal quarterback only stat like freaking 8 years ago. And obviously Richardson has his misses, as you said, but the box score lies to you a little bit here. And it's also just a reminder, like, let's just not live and die with every single week here. You know, there's going to be ups and downs for this guy. And just because one game looked like this low completion percentage doesn't mean it's the exact same with this other low completion percentage. So yeah, he's a great example to actually watch the games and provide the context like you just did, Dalton. And 2, like, every single week, it's not just going to be constant linear. There's going to be up and downs to him. I just don't think this game certainly was not like there were some real low moments before he got benched. The game against the Texans, I think, was a real deal low moment for him. This was not one of those. Even if there were some misfires and receiver errors, just like there was in that game against Houston, this did not feel like that game against Houston before he got benched.
And one final context with his completion percentage. It's his average depth of target. I forget if it was 14.1, 15.1, or 16.1, but either way, it was more than 14 yards downfield, 99th percentile. I mean, so yeah, you're going to complete fewer of your passes when you're attempting, it's like the opposite of Mahomes. I mean, he's attempting like 4 yards down the field. It's like 10 yards more average depth of target. It's very, very extreme. I mean, obviously it's not, maybe that's part of the problem, let's get some more layups, but anyway. Your guy Downs now maybe missed multiple weeks. That's a brutal blow too, because he's a awesome player.
He's awesome. Yeah, he's kind of the layup creator, so that does suck. Although I'll talk about a potential option in the pickups section
maybe
later.
More targets for Taylor, the underneath stuff. If you lose Downs,
true.
If we're talking Taylor there, it's possible he benefits from Downs missing a couple weeks.
Yeah, and final note on Richardson too. the fact that he doesn't take a lot of sacks. I mean, there were a couple of ones where he was like in the grasp and he just gets rid of the ball at the end. Like those throwaways go down as incompletions. But again, that's why it's important to actually watch the games and not just look at completion percentage. Like, give me a break. Again, I thought we moved past this. All right, let's get to Tom F's email because he sends in just a bunch of candidates here. And shout out to Tom for kind of filling the whole segment with several candidates to talk through on this one. So, hi, Matt and Dalton. Quite a few worthy candidates this week. I think Malik Nabers deserves to go straight to the coping corner now that Tommy Cutlets is slinging it, and the Giants have waved the white flag on the season. Secondly, Dalton. This breaks my heart, but the entire Niners offense and defense qualifies for the coping corner due to woeful red zone efficiency, injuries, and negative regression. Aside from Jawan Jennings and Kittle, no one is playable. Injuries and game script will continue to limit CMC's ceiling. Our expectations in his draft capital will not be realized this year. As a football fan, this is painful. Finally, both Mark Andrews and Brian Thomas Jr. should be permanently relegated to the coping corner. Usage for the Ravens and ineptitude for the Jaguars cap their potential. A lot to unpack. Tell me your thoughts. Cheers, Tom in Los Angeles. Obviously, by the time you're listening to this, I will have already talked about Monday Night Football and Mark Andrews, so we're not going to talk about it here because that game has not happened yet as the time we're taping this. But let's talk about these other three situations. And before we get to your Niners, let's talk about Malik Nabers. Where are we at with Malik Nabers, who right now is wide receiver 14? That does not really accurately capture the story of his season, which was great to start, concussion, comes back, offense falls apart. Andrew Thomas no longer available as a left tackle. Daniel Jones is benched, then released. Tommy Cutlets comes in. He's no good. Nabers after the game is talking. Ask Dabes is why I'm not getting the ball until we're down 30-0. So I feel like Malik Nabers is a classic. Like you can be right and wrong about a player in the course of one season.
Yeah, I'm very in on Nabers, have him on a lot of my teams. Total panic here. Tommy Cutlets, not great. He has the fourth longest stretch without an interception in Giants franchise history, but that's not necessarily good for fantasy. The ideal INT rate is P&L's cited Mike Salfino is not 0%, especially for fantasy receivers. And he takes 1 million sacks too. So he's not taking risks downfield and he's taking 1 million sacks. I guess one positive is Daboll's come out right before we're recording and basically said, we'll center the offense around him moving forward after, totally ignored in the first half last week. But as Daboll lost the locker room as well. So this is a dire situation just because of the quarterback, but an awesome player who's still going to see double-digit targets. So it's just like CeeDee Lamb, kind of a PPR scam type player over the final month of the year.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, we haven't really seen them scamming him touches. Yeah. That's the thing. Like, I mean, again, CeeDee Lamb, 10 catches or something for 60-something yards. That is the true PPR scam.
I think that's what's going to happen now, Dable, after all this. That's what I'm predicting to move forward. But it may not result in touchdowns or more 100 yards,
Yeah, I don't know. And I mean, definitely, as Colin has wanted us to talk about, incessantly lately, the Cowboys defense has gotten better. They were much better against Washington. They were a big reason that Washington struggled offensively because their pass rush is better. You tell me Micah Parsons is not driving Tommy DeVito into the dirt 5 times, whether pressures, sacks, whatever, quarterback hits. You tell me that's not happening on Thanksgiving? I don't know. I am tempted to say coping corner for Malik Nabers just because I feel like we're talking about him every week at this point, and I think it is. I think it's been is what it is territory for a minute here, but this matchup against the Giants on Thanksgiving and post kind of the squeaky wheel gets the grease narrative here. I want to give it one more week. I do think we are at total panic, and I'll say that if he does not, if we don't see like proactive PPR scan, because that's the best you can hope for. Okay, freaking DeVito's under center. You're hoping he gets a bunch of screens and nonsense, and maybe he breaks one play. Maybe that's the best you're hoping for. If we don't get that type of usage Thursday on Thanksgiving, then I think we're close to. Then I think we're at coping corner with Nabers.
Yeah, I'm totally good with that. Let's just give him one more week reprieve here, and then be very ready to put him in that corner though if we don't see anything better. And then I guess DeVito's he's banged up, but is Drew Lock even going to be any better? So it's a disaster. Yeah,
that's the funny thing with all this talk about Drew Lock. I'm like, there's a chance we see Drew Lock at some point, whether it's injury or just they do DeVito for a couple of games, and then it's all right. That's enough of that. Let's see. Less
chance to get those incentives if there was some financial reasons for the lock or whatever, and even if that was true or not. But it'll be harder to reach incentives in a couple games, I'm guessing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. All right, so you would be the best person to ask this, Dalton. CMC and the entire 49ers offense. Are we at coping corner territory with the 49ers offense?
This just depends on Purdy's health, is what I mean. Yeah. I've heard you, write the obituary with Barron's, and in your column, you quoted that. Let me quote you guys saying they're toast. Last week was a disaster. They had the most missed tackles in the first 10 missed tackles in the first quarter, NFL high. They really bad blocking. CMC, I go back and forth. It's clear he's not, 100%, but there's also blocking issues. And last week, not only were they missing Purdy, but no Trent Williams, no Nick Bosa, no Mooney Ward. It was the first time the 49ers weren't favorites in 36 games, Harmon.
Wow.
They're done if Purdy's done. But if he returns, I'm guessing this may surprise you, but do you realize that they rank second in yards per play this season and sixth in yards per play against? Despite a tough schedule against a team that's coming off a bye seemingly every week, including this one in Buffalo. The one saving grace here is their division is still pretty weak. But yeah, I'm not writing off the Niners offense at all if Purdy returns. I mean, second in the NFL in yards per play. I mean, they're horrible in the red zone. I mean, I think that's going to regress. But if Trent Williams, high ankle sprain, he keeps battling this injury, and Purdy's elbow is a problem, yeah, we can move him right in there real quick. Not only is Brandon Allen bad, but he's playing with a splint on his non-throwing. He broke his finger 2 weeks ago.
Is anyone healthy in San Francisco? Is anyone healthy?
A total disaster. And why is Pearsall getting 0 targets? Deebo Samuel cannot catch the ball. I get it. There are problems, but let me repeat: the second most, and yards per game too. If you're not a fan of yards per play, they're second in yards per game as well. I just think some of this is variance, and they've lost some crazy games, blown leads in the final fourth quarter, and that may be too much now, to make the playoffs. But as far as productivity for the offense, I think if Purdy returns, I'm still going to be excited to start Jennings and Kittle and CMC.
I'm with you that I think it does depend on Purdy, and it sounds like we got a pretty good report about him throwing today at practice, so maybe we'll see him this next week. I'm with you. Yeah, Purdy out. If there's no Purdy, all these bros are in the coping corner. But let's just take this player by player for a second. So panic level with CMC. Are we at some panic, total panic? I'm with you. He's not coping corner worthy yet. Although I don't think he's going to reach running back 1 overall type ceiling, but he's certainly usable in fantasy. But I don't know. To me, that gives me certainly at least some panic, if not total panic, if you were just relying on him to come back and save your fantasy season.
Yeah, the workload's still been there. And again, to me, it's just Purdy. I think the touchdowns have not been there, and I just think they're going to come. But with Brandon Allen, yeah, he's definitely not going to be the expectations you would hope for. And he's not going to be Barkley, right? Yeah, I hear you. Maybe Gibbs without Montgomery. Those guys do have higher ceilings right now than the version we're looking at. I hear what you're saying. There's some panic on CMC.
What about Deebo? I'll bring up a tweet that we were going to discuss in the second half, but I think it's prime makes sense to discuss it right now. At Jay Scholl tweets pretty bluntly about Deebo Samuel. Deebo really considering dropping him for a Week 16 defense. That's brutal for a guy who's drafted as wide receiver 17. So I personally, Dalton, think he's a coping corner candidate.
I was going to say the same. Yeah, agreed. I don't know whether it's the injuries, the pneumonia, which can, I guess, last multiple weeks. Whatever the reason, he's not going to get as many carries with CMC back. And now we have quarterback problems, but he's multiple drops, and he's just not like a receiver downfield, and the gadget plays aren't there this year. So I don't know what to tell you. It's wild with Ayuk out for the year. But I'm with you with coping corner, and the expert consensus ranks on Fantasy Pros just every week. There's no player that gets ranked egregiously too high, and he continued to last week. But if, let's say, Purdy returns healthy and the rest of the team gets healthy, I'm 1,000% ranking Juwan Jennings ahead of Deebo without second thought.
Agree. And you said that last week, and I think that was dead on. I don't think it's a second thought now at this point. And even Jennings, I love Jennings, but he's not giving you downfield. This is the thing with the efficiency stats. I get it. They're all there. They're just not a dangerous offense. They're not an offense that I think scares you at this point. And even Jennings, as much as I like him, he's just not that type of scary player at the X receiver position like Brandon Ayuk is when he's at his best. So it's just tough.
Sorry, we'll move on to the Niners. That's a great fair point. He had stopped throwing downfield after the Ayuk injury. I personally am did he hurt that shoulder? Did it coincide? Is that more, if that happened too? Either way, all the downfield stuff has stopped since they went out. So me just citing these season-long numbers may be unfair in the sense of this offense doesn't quite look nearly the same, even if they're getting it done in other ways. I hear what you're saying. That aspect is disappeared.
Yeah, and even Pearsall, obviously, you want to be patient on Pearsall because he got shot in the offseason. Like, he shouldn't have to be out here playing as much as he is at this point, even if he was a fully healthy player. It's just that seems kind of crazy. Ayuk went out week 7? Week 7 was the
that sounds right. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just looking at some efficiency stats and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, since week 7, they're 17th in offensive EPA. I get it's not yards per play, whatever, but yeah, and they're 13th in success rate. So they're not a horrible offense. I don't think anybody's saying that. They're just not going to meet those expectations, I think.
Last week's probably hurt that status without Williams and Purdy. By the way, they got more yards per play than the Packers in that blowout loss.
Oh, congratulations! They must have done really well.
I know they're the champs of that. Yeah, I know. Man, Kyle Shanahan's going to lose it too. This is the nightmare season, and I get it. Could get blown out against Buffalo, and they have no margin for error. They can lose one more game this season, pretty much. So it's going to be tricky, but they need a healthy Purdy.
Yeah, and we really can't put them fully in the coping corner because it doesn't really matter. George Kittle's still like an elite tight end in fantasy football when he's out there. So, yeah, I mean, McCaffrey probably is still he's fine. I'm at some panic for sure, but definitely Deebo coping corner. Absolutely, he is the one that definitely needs to go in there. Let's talk Brian Thomas Jr. real quick because he was the last member of Tom's email here. Brian Thomas Jr. On the bye last week. We're not quite sure what's going to happen with Trevor Lawrence. Maybe he's going to come back, which seems kind of crazy for this lost Jaguars team for Trevor to come back out there and maybe risk serious injury behind an offensive line that's a little questionable. But if Trevor's out there, I'm kind of at no panic with BTJ. Obviously, if he's not out there, then that's a different story.
Yeah, I don't have much to say on BTJ other than let's hope Trevor Lawrence comes back, and then it's only some to no panic, and it might be total though with Mac Jones, but I just can't wait to see to draft BTJ next year, man. He's a awesome player.
Same, awesome player. I hope he can get some more targets. Like let's throw him 24% of the targets and see what happens. That would be nice. But with that, let's take our first break, and then we'll get into our social media suggestions on the other side right after this. All right, we're back. Let's get into the social media submissions to the People's Panic Meter. This first one comes in from @Wilkel39. Let's have the conversation. I knew we were going to get them, so we got several submissions about Justin Jefferson. This one first. I'm super interested in JJ's game. Do we panic? I see a bunch of people saying he was, quote, triple covered all game and question the validity of that. Did the Bears just double/box him out the whole game? Or are people exaggerative? Appreciate your work as always. Charles X also adds this on Twitter. Justin Jefferson seems like they're content to let him play decoy out there. So I've been pushing back on this Justin Jefferson panic for several episodes, Dalton. Kind of talked about it a little bit with Andy yesterday, but I knew we were gonna get this again. I knew we were gonna have to talk about it here. Shout out to @CozyTrav, who was the first person I think who started sending in Justin Jefferson panic, and I kind of waved him off. Well, congratulations, CozyTrav. You were right to maybe be a little concerned about JJ. Where are we at, Dalton, after what is definitely the bottoming out moment for Justin Jefferson's season against the Bears last week?
I'm more curious your thoughts here, but it was encouraging that Darnold played well. He'd really struggled since losing left tackle Darisaw, and I believe Robinson even got injured this game too. Yep. So he's bounced back and he looked. He's obviously the defense was concentrating on stopping Jefferson, so he went to Addison. But that's a run funnel Chicago defense with a decent secondary. These things happen with even the superstar receivers. What are your thoughts, Harmon?
Yeah, I think that we saw a pretty aggressive game plan trying to stop Justin Jefferson. It definitely there's no triple coverage in the NFL. Just because like three guys are around him when the target comes his way does not mean he is getting triple covered. If you literally the math doesn't work. You triple cover a player, you are just going to be conceding yards and points to Dalton Del Don out there at wide receiver. Anybody could get open against a defense that's triple covering somebody else. So that doesn't happen. But definitely some double teams. Jalen Johnson right up on him in the line of scrimmage. And we've seen defenses do this with Justin Jefferson previously where they will hard double cover him with a press corner at the line of scrimmage. And we saw that specifically some leverage situations there with Johnson against Justin Jefferson. And that's going to happen. This is a good number one corner in Jalen Johnson and a defense that has slowed down primary options while giving things up to secondary options. And that's the thing here is that this plan that the Bears had, yeah, great. You held Justin Jefferson to 27 yards. Well, everybody else smoked you. I mean, Jordan Addison just wide open on some of these big post routes and these deep overs, which is what's going to happen when you dedicate extra resources. You bring a safety over there to cover Justin Jefferson. Well, you've got just some of the easiest looks of all time, which is why you drafted Jordan Addison. Remember, they even said that in the post-draft presser. Kevin O'Connell said, yeah, we're drafting Jordan Addison because he's going to get some of the easiest looks across the NFL with Justin Jefferson on the other side. So, yeah, this is going to happen to number one receivers. I guess I'm at some panic here, maybe, Dalton. I'm not going to say no panic because it's 27 yards. It's a brutal game to have to just look at. I'm hoping, but maybe this is me in the coping corner, I'm hoping that this performance from Addison, this performance from Hawkinson is going to force teams to be like, hey, we have to account for these other guys. We can't just sell out to stop number 18. But again, maybe that's me coping. I do think there's a little bit of panic here with Jefferson, even just because they're not throwing the ball at a super high rate. They have a good defense. They're in kind of weird game scripts. I don't know. I'm talking a lot here. You interject.
I'm good with some panic there. Although the counter is just so many injuries to all the star receivers.
Right.
The fantasy receivers has been such a disaster this year. But yes, you wish you had taken Jamar Chase over him in hindsight. But I think Jefferson will be fine. By the way, I would get yards on that one play, and then I'd be stretchered off immediately after getting tackled. Speaking of stretchered off, hope my guy Jatavian Sanders is okay, which reports are he is, because man, that guy can play. I'm telling you, get him in
100%.
Dynasty and draft him next year.
100% agree. Yeah, the Panthers have a lot of some interesting young pass catchers. I'm with you that I think it's just a little some panic on Jefferson. You can't be feeling great about that performance then heading into like the stretch run here of fantasy football. But look, if Justin Jefferson has an eruption game at any point, you cannot be surprised by it, maybe even in the next few games here. Let's move on to this tweet from @BipolarGarage, which, of course, we're talking Arizona Cardinals. Perfect for the Cardinals here. Why do the Cardinals always pull me back in? I can't take much more of this up and down from Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. Why can't I quit them? That said, I'm still going to have to play them next week. Aren't I? Yeah, you probably are. Really disappointing performance from the Cardinals offense coming out of the bye, Dalton Del Don. What are your thoughts about Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr.?
I'm throwing my hands up. I don't know. Scoring 6 points, fast-paced matchup, one of this week's highest projected totals coming out of the bye. Murray had gotten 9.1 yards per attempt over his previous 3 games against top pass defenses, and then they just lay an egg out of the bye. Not producing 1 touchdown. Man, I don't know. Do you have any explanation? No quarterback has been more feast or famine than Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I just think Murray has been up and down this year. I don't think he's played great on balance. I think he's had really good moments. I think he's had some lower moments. I think this is also a highly volatile offense, and Marvin Harrison Jr. plays in a highly volatile role. So I think I'm almost tempted to just throw both these dudes in the coping corner just so we don't have to talk about them every episode, because I do think it's going to continue to be up and down. Like, yeah, Bipolar Garage, you're probably starting Kyler next week because there's not 12 quarterbacks better than him in fantasy. Like, there's just not. And you're probably going to end up starting Marvin Harrison Jr. Or if you don't start him, he could certainly go off on your bench. I will say, and actually I meant to send Colin a message about this, so I'm just going to tell you on the podcast, buddy, as opposed to messenger. I think when we get back from Thanksgiving on the other side and we have a fantasy film room with Nate Tice, I do think we should talk about like defenses that we need to pay attention to heading into the fantasy stretch run, because I think Seattle might be one of them. Watching that game back, that was a really good defensive performance from Mike McDonald and the guys. They really rushed the passer well. That play where Kyler's like sprinting out to the edge on 4th down and Devin Witherspoon just catches up to him. You could almost like Kyler just throws that ball up in a panic because he's like, what are you talking about? I'm Kyler Murray. I'm supposed to beat this guy to the edge. It was like the first time anyone ever, like, almost like 9 times out of 10, 9.9 times out of 10, Murray beats that guy to the edge and runs for the first down. And I think he almost was like freaked out by the fact that Witherspoon caught up to him. But Witherspoon's great. He's a freak show. He's an awesome player. So I think Seattle's defense actually deserves a lot of credit for what happened to Arizona in this game.
Both these defenses, I think, are underrated and playing better than their season-long stats suggest. But Seattle I think it was Brock Purdy's second lowest yardage output the week before, the Seahawks. Their defense is playing better. I fell for the Harrison hype this week, the rookie bump by. He's faced the league's fifth toughest for fantasy wide receiver schedule up until now, and he gets the fourth easiest down the stretch. And you look deep in the matchups. He's second in the league in fantasy points per route run against press, and the Seahawks reportedly use press a ton. So it seemed like a right matchup there, but man, his role continues to be more of an issue than him underperforming as a rookie. It's just so tough to remain consistent seeing the routes they're having him run. So I'm good with if you want to move them into the coping corner because this is just who this team is.
Yeah, I mean, again, though, they're fantasy starters. I just am tired of the panic, the panic stuff. I mean, this is who these guys are. They're going to be a little up and down. So yeah, screw it.
Can McBride ever catch a touchdown? 80 targets,
Great question.
0 receiving touchdowns. It's
he's on pace for 1,100
Cardinals.
yards as a tight end or something like that, and he's not going to score a touchdown, or he hasn't scored a touchdown. Yeah, honestly, F it. Move him into the coping corner. Remember, you can still play them. They can still have big games. But we're towards the end of the season. We only have a few more of these coping corner opportunities left. How have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyler Murray should be in the coping corner? We should be coping a lot longer ago with Marvin Harrison, who was like the best ball freaks were drafting him in the first round this year. So throw him in the coping corner. I'm good with it, just so we don't have to talk about them next week, for God's sakes. All right. Speaking of don't want to talk about this anymore, at Dynasty Super sends in this tweet. Jayden Reed is really good on the first two drives and then is completely invisible. What is happening here? Jayden Reed is still wide receiver 10 overall in fantasy. That's a lying stat, right, Dalton? Talk about a stat that lies to you. I know what's going on here. I'm going to tell you what. It's a crowded offense. You say it every week. A lot of dudes in the pass catching department. And since they came back from the bye, the Packers are now 32nd in neutral pass rate. They smoked the Niners. They didn't have to really try. But I don't want to get too down on these players because they can't, especially Jayden Reed is a really good player. And Romeo Doubs might miss this game on Thanksgiving against the Dolphins because he was put in a concussion protocol and it's a short week. So Jayden Reed could probably have any of these guys could have big games at any moment, but I will put it to you this way, Dalton, and you tell me if I'm wrong about this. I don't think you can confidently start a Packers pass catcher going forward in fantasy if they continue to lean into the run game like they have been, and there's no reason they shouldn't lean into this run game.
Yeah, the Packers had the lowest neutral pass rate by far over the previous month before this Niner game where they ran the ball by crazy. By the way, the coach said afterward that you may see more Wilson and Brooks with Jacobs' heavy workload in a short week. That also might mean more passing. Jordan Love's averaged 20 passes over the last 2 games, 20. Right. So it's hard to be productive as pass catchers when you're throwing the ball 20 times per game. It could be a shootout on Thursday night against the Dolphins. That one could be a fun one. So, he's going to be volatile. Jayden Reed was always even more so than your average receiver because he's a big play guy, relies on touchdowns, and he's not seeing the volume as other guys ranked as highly as him. So, sure, some panic, but better days are ahead, especially Dobbs being injured, as you said. He's probably unlikely to play on a short week.
Yeah, I was close to saying coping corner for Jayden Reed, and I'm a huge Jayden Reed fan, but it's just the thing is, tell me unless you're right and they do start throwing the ball more, but their run game is so good, and it's clear they want to lean into it. And yeah, the fact that Dobbs is probably going to miss Thanksgiving, that gives me some hope that Reed can have a big statement game. But if he doesn't, then I think he's very similar to Nabers, for very different reasons that he might then be coping corner after that.
Yeah, totally fair. But Jacobs' first 100-yard rusher against the Niners on Sunday in 55 games or 56 games. Pretty wild. He was a beast, man. He was so good.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's been he's not quite like Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, overwhelmingly like what an incredible signing, but he's been everything that the Packers could have possibly wanted from him, and he's just finally scoring touchdowns now. Like that's it. I mean, he's scoring touchdowns. That's the only difference in his season from start to finish. I guess maybe they've varied up the run concepts and all that type of stuff, but yeah, I think we're good on that one. Okay, let's talk this next one from @Tidy. Sends in Tyreek Hill. they've got Waddle going. The passing game is opening up. Next, it's time for Hill in time for the fantasy playoffs. Tyreek Hill even tweeted this himself. Great meme of the guy looking at the girl. The other girl pissed looking at him with, Tua. I love when I can explain a meme on a podcast. That's great. You look at Tyreek Hill's Twitter if you want to see it. Anyways, I think Tyreek Hill's a coping corner candidate too, Dalton.
Yeah, it's been very frustrating. Last week, matchup indicators said very good matchup against New England, and then he ended up being the only one who didn't eat in Miami. It felt like, this is the version. Whether it's the injury or just the different offensive system, I think it's time to put him in the coping corner. I mean, the only argument I'd counter is Miami is like second in points per drive since Tua returned. So the offense is, it's kind of got some upside there. But yeah, I mean, it's the targets haven't been there. The explosive plays downfield haven't been there. So I'm good with moving. It's sad, but moving Reek to the coping corner.
And I would say that if you look at just the data and I watched this game because I barely saw any of it on Sunday. So I watched this game back this morning. Like, I think they finally started designing more stuff for Jalen Waddle because Waddle, and I think this is smart too, by the way, because I think Tyreek looks a little bit like a small step back has happened here, maybe even multiple steps back, but that'll take like a full off season of charting data for me to kind of say that for sure. But to the eye test, I don't think he looks quite the same. Maybe it's the wrist injury from, the pre-week one whole thing with the whatever. Anyways, I don't know. But what I do know is that Waddle took fewer snaps at X receiver in this past game, and he had more first read targets than Tyreek Hill did in this past game. And I think that's smart because Waddle is so dynamic, and he has always been the guy that gets no designed targets, and he just gets a lot of the difficult X receiver reps. I'd love to see him get more of the old Tyreek Hill role, and Tyreek Hill maybe not be force-fed those looks because Waddle is such a good player. Nothing about Waddle's fantasy slump has been about him as a player. It's just been situation-based. And Jonnu Smith's still the number one target. They're still going to get Devon Achane involved here. Those are smart. Those things should remain. But I do think that I get why they'd want to rely on Tyreek Hill less, and I'd like to see Waddle more in those designed roles, which is what we saw this past game.
Well, interesting. Maybe last week's breakout wasn't just a variance. If you're saying his role did meaningfully kind of change as you saw on the tape.
Yeah, it's just 1 week, so it's hard to say. But, and it's on my radar that this game is in Green Bay. It's going to be cold, Tua in cold weather. Thanksgiving.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah,
I didn't even think about it until I just talked with Co about this like an hour ago, and I'm totally. I was looking forward to this game, and now I'm thinking, oh no, we've got a cold weather Tua game.
The
narrative will be will be up and running here. All right, let's do 2 more here before we get to our waiver wire segment. Mike G says this about Kyren Williams. Is Kyren Williams at risk of losing usage because of his fumbles? Kyren Williams, not a great run out the last few weeks, but he did find his way into the end zone. The fumbles, I don't know, man. The fumbles, I guess it's a talking point, but Sean McVay loves this guy and never pulls him off the field. So is there any reason to freak out about Kyren Williams?
I mean, 4 fumbles in 4 games, 2 loss. That's getting I would say I agree with you. McVay absolutely loves him, and it didn't seem like Corum got too much added work. But I would say 1 or 2 more on the carpet may put him at risk. And as much as McVay loves Kyren, he's getting 4.0 yards per carry and 0 targets over the last 2 weeks. That's another concern. But I think for now he's fine. He'll remain locked in as a workhorse role. But yeah, another 1 or 2 fumbles, and I think there may be legit concern because that's 4 in 4 games is kind of excessive.
91% of the snaps against the Eagles on Sunday Night Football. But yeah, 0 targets in the passing game for 2 weeks in a row here. That is interesting. And I think they could use more targets to Kyren Williams because Stafford's just getting smoked when there's any pressure. But yeah, I guess I'm maybe just at some panic about the Kyren Williams stuff, which sounds stupid because, again, he just scored a touchdown, playing 91% of the snaps. But it's at least on my radar, the whole fumble situation.
I'm convinced dumping the running backs is the cheat code, and that's what one of Brady's most underrated aspects. You watch Brady, even the comebacks in the Super Bowl drives, dude, they're all dump offs to James White. It's use the running back as it's so cliche extension running. Just dump it off your running back. I really think that's underutilized by a lot of quarterbacks.
2 things. Agree with you that, and put your receivers in the backfield some more. Shoot, Marvin Mims getting a backfield rep where he just nobody's near him, and he's freaking Marvin Mims, but like you dump it off to Marvin Mims and he takes it like 40 plus yards. That touchdown to Josh Downs 2 weeks ago out of the backfield. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been the king of this. CeeDee Lamb's been getting some targets out of the backfield. That's a way they've PPR scammed his usage there. I love that. Put your receivers in the backfield and definitely dump it off to the running back. I agree with you. Secondly, about Tom Brady, because I'm sure you obviously just watched him call this game. It's endearing, I think, how much he loves like a physical run game. Like he's the best quarterback, or at least the most decorated quarterback of all time. Everybody thinks of him as like, oh my God, what a processor, the whole thing, like the passing game wizard. And he is, for sure. He's freaking Tom Brady. But no, I feel like the times I've seen him most juiced up is when he's talking about a run game like the Packers against the 49ers. That seems to be what gets his blood flowing the most. So I find that to be endearing about Brady in a weird way.
I actually meant to ask you if you on a panic meter level of Brady, the announcer, but then I went off on my Niners instead. But he did the Niner game frequently, hard on Purdy. Where do we stand on him? A lot of people give him a hard time, but where do you stand, Harmon?
I think he's kind of fine. He doesn't ruin the game for me, which is the one, like that's the one thing you can't do as an announcer. Don't ruin the game for me. Don't annoy me, basically. Don't be, like you're out at a bar and there's somebody that's just annoying you that you're watching the game with. That can ruin the entire experience. I don't want the announcer to be that. Some of the guys trend into that territory sometimes. I don't think Brady does. I also don't really necessarily think he is added too much. I like when he geeks out about football, and I like when he was it the Jordan Brooks Cowboys receiver, that anecdote about like, oh Tom, are you going back to him? Not today. Nope. Like when he does stuff like that, that's good. Or when he does geek out about the run game, I enjoy that. So I don't know. I think he's been fine so far.
And it can get better too. I'm with you. That is endearing, that part of him, and I like when he gets shows emotion and he gets into it. But and then it's tough replacing Greg Olsen, who's pretty awesome. So okay,
fair. He's no Greg Olsen, and he's definitely he's on a ridiculously large contract, and it's tough. Like Olsen should be a headline guy. He should be a number one booth, but he's not gonna be. So we'll see what happens there. Yeah, I just think Brady's been fine. He's no dude. Monday Night Football hasn't happened yet. I love watching Aikman and Buck. They're my favorite by far. They're my favorite by far. That's been the case for like the last couple of years. Love them on ESPN. Love that they get these big games. Like hopefully tonight's game is good because that should be a good one for Aikman and Buck.
Yeah, I like them too. Especially Aikman's got a lot better throughout his broadcasting career.
Yeah, it's weird because you can tell that I think he, with all the like money that got thrown around during the Romo stuff, like I think he wanted to take his game to another level, but he basically did it by giving less of a which I think is great because now he's very candid. He lets things fly. He lets you know when he's annoyed, which I enjoy because I cover football. I love football. When it's May, I want to see live football. I get it. But bad football is still annoying, okay? Like we can cover this game and we can love it. Watching Daniel Jones take a bunch of sacks and the Giants get penalized or the freaking Texans not be able to protect CJ Stroud, that is still annoying as shit. And when Aikman is disgusted by it and is annoyed by bad football, I enjoy that. And being honest about it is important too. And he certainly, that is true. He is honest.
No, yeah, you're right. He is not caring less about players in the league, to talk negative of them either. It's definitely better than the Thursday night crew, man. I don't know how many more years Al Michaels has left.
Yeah, we'll see about that. All right, let's finish this with one more before we go to waiver wire. I don't really know what to add about this one, but Golden Seed _13 sends in this about Brian Robinson Jr. Says he just won't get back on track. I don't know what to say. I mean, he gets injured early in the game. He tries to come back. He gets removed again. Austin Eckler suffered a scary concussion in this one, so they play on Sunday. We'll see if these guys can get back out there. But the run game, I will say, I'm a little concerned about the run game so far in Washington, where I think some of the talent on the offensive line has kind of like that issue has cropped back up the longer we've gone into the season here.
Yeah, that's just health related. return to the game, but then he had to ultimately leave, and apparently Robinson's getting treatment on his ankle as of Monday. So up in the air. I'm going to talk about Jeremy McNichols in the upcoming waiver wire section because your guy Austin Eckler, was horrible. That kick return shouldn't have even happened. The previous one could have went down at the 1 yard line to end the game, and then Eckler takes a massive hit. But if Robinson would, we'd get more carries if he's healthy and Eckler's out. Do you want to talk a little Cliff Kingsbury quickly? Part of me is like, he has these history of bad second halves, and why is McLaurin staying on one side of the field? And the other part of me is, well, maybe he has bad second halves because he always has running quarterbacks. So that's what's going to happen with running quarterbacks. And Washington was due for 3rd and 4th down regression. I mean, they were running so hot, and that happened to hit during the toughest part of their schedule too. So that said, though, I mean, Jayden Daniels was a fantasy bust for 2.5 quarters. I mean, it looked awful. And then he, it's a QB1 on the final, benefiting from an 86-yard touchdown, less than 30 seconds left. So he ran more. Hopefully he's healthier. What are your thoughts on the Kingsbury situation?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the games that the Commanders have won this year. They beat the Giants. They beat the Bengals in that big shootout game. They beat the Cardinals when they weren't quite the team that we've expected. They beat the Browns with Deshaun Watson. They lost to the Ravens. They beat the Panthers when they were, circling the drain. They beat the Bears on the Hail Mary play. Then they beat the Giants again. And then they've lost 3 straight to the Steelers, the Eagles, and a Cowboys team that is not, I mean, we've dogged on the Cowboys and they are, a little ridiculous, but their defense is good it's not good, but it's better when Micah Parsons is out there. And that was obviously a very weird game as well. So I don't know. I don't think this is a Cliff Kingsbury issue. I think this is that these players aren't that good. Like they have a superstar receiver in Terry McLaurin, who they could definitely cater to a little bit more, but like Noah Brown was cut by the Texans and they picked him up right before the season. They don't really want to play Luke McCaffrey, their rookie receiver, which I think is interesting. We're talking about like De'Ami Brown and these guys. And then the offensive line, like this was an offensive line that was supposed to be the worst in the league. Like Brandon Thorne does great work with offensive lines. I talked to him in the offseason. He had them ranked as the 32nd offensive line in the NFL this year. And they've obviously outkicked those expectations, but still the talent levels there's a reason that Brandon would have had them towards the bottom of the league. So I don't know. I think, and it's a rookie quarterback too, who hasn't been 100% healthy of late either. So yeah, I'm with you. I think there's more than just the Cliff Kingsbury stuff at effect here. I think that's just kind of a convenient narrative.
All right. That sounds right. Okay. Yeah. Robinson, let's just hope he's healthy is the thing there. And again, I mean, he could get a fantasy boost of the unfortunate Eckler injury too, if Robinson's able to return from his ankle.
All right, so we added technically 4 people to the coping corner. Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr., Deebo Samuel, Tyreek Hill, to go along with Aaron Rodgers, Nick Chubb, Pat Mahomes, and Xavier Worthy, Sam Laporta, Javonte Williams, Jalen Waddle, Dallas Cowboys offense, Deontay Johnson, and CJ Stroud. We're going to take our final break. As Dalton teased on the other side, he's got a pickup from this Washington offense to get through. We will talk through all of our waiver wire options right after this. All right, we are back, and let's take a look at this week's Waiver Wire Connections presented by Spectrum. Every week, Dalton and I share a large, medium, and small priority player from the waiver wire. Heading into week 13, an important week here on Thanksgiving. Dalton, let's go through some of our pickups here. Get us started with your small priority player off the waiver wire.
Yeah, not a super lucrative week in the waiver wire, but I'm going to go with Jeremy McNichols. It's my small priority. As we said, Brian Robinson left last week's game with an ankle injury. Austin Eckler suffered a scary-looking concussion. Chris Rodriguez could also see work, but McNichols is definitely worth adding as Washington's possible RB1 this week. The Commanders are 5.5-point home favorites. Game script could be favorable. Robinson is undergoing treatment on his ankle, so his status is just up in the air right now. And McNichols is available in 99% of Yahoo leagues.
Yeah, I love it. Look, this week maybe you don't need him because you got all these teams coming back from bye, but next week we got a bunch of bye weeks, and if it's going to be a multi-week for either of these backs, I think McNichols could end up being a player who is a starter for you in fantasy down the stretch. My small priority player, talked about it with Andy on yesterday's show, but I've got myself convinced of it. Noah Gray, 4% rostered. Noah Gray is 4th on the Chiefs in routes since week 10. He is not this is not just random touchdowns and things like that. He has 11 targets, 10 catches. He has 3 targets in the end zone, which is tied with DeAndre Hopkins for the team lead. there are real deal usage indicators here that he is a big part of this offense. And how many tight ends do you feel all that confident about? If you've been streaming at the position, I think Noah Gray is a viable option, especially because the matchups for Kansas City, look, I know they just played the Panthers. The Panthers defense is what it is, but it's not as if the Chiefs are facing some of these crazy matchups down the stretch. They do get the Raiders this week here in week 13, a Browns defense in week 15 that has been problematic. There are some spots where you can start Noah Gray down the stretch if he continues to hold this usage where he's running a route on about 50 to 60% of the dropbacks.
Noah Gray, 4 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. Travis Kelce, 2 touchdowns this season. Pretty wild. My medium pickup, Xavier Legette. He maintained solid usage despite Adam Thielen's return last week. But most importantly, Harmon, Bryce Young has shown major signs of growth as a passer. He suddenly looks like a real NFL quarterback. Young had his highest ever catchable throw rate on throws 10-plus yards downfield last week, 87%. Legette gets a prime matchup against the Buccaneers this week. Rookie wide receivers often don't go off until the final month of the season. Legette is available in nearly 75% of Yahoo leagues. David Moore is also getting a lot of targets there too with our guy Coker sidelined.
Yeah, interested to see what the room looks like when Coker is out there. But yeah, they moved Xavier Legette to X receiver, which I think is interesting. Maybe a good sign that they're really happy with what they've seen from Legette, although I personally have some questions if that's the best deployment for him. And I really like how he was used early on the season. But agree, Legette definitely gets a boost because Bryce Young has been playing much better football. I'll talk about another rookie wide receiver here. I'm actually going to talk about 2 rookies the rest of the way. Devon Vele, 5% rostered, is my medium priority player. Vele is a massive, both from a size perspective and age perspective, rookie. I mean, he's but to be 27 next month, Dalton. It's pretty crazy. 6'5", 210 pounds, but he's their slot receiver. He has been in the slot for most of his snaps, but he got a pretty big playing time promotion, 68% of the routes in this last game against the Raiders. He is one of the more efficient rookies from a yards per route run perspective. I don't know if he's a future superstar or anything, but I think he's a really useful player. He gets a matchup with a Browns team that, one, could have Jameis Winston, pushing it on the other side, maybe a little higher scoring affair here. We'll see. Denver Broncos defense is tough. But more importantly, the Browns have blown a lot of coverages in the back end. That secondary has been problematic, especially 2 slot receivers, secondary receivers, things like that. So Vele, I think, could be a sneaky fantasy starter. It's pretty clear that Bo Nix trusts him right now.
I almost went with Vele when I beat you into the dock. He's Denver's emerging as Denver's wide receiver too. Bo Nix is throwing the ball downfield more, running less. Sean Payton is cooking, man. His schemes are pretty impressive. It really is. Like, I know Bo Nix is great. I mean, he's very good for a rookie, maybe win Rookie of the Year. But Peyton deserves a ton of credit, man. He's scheming like crazy. My large priority, Jalen Wright on the Dolphins. Now, his production hasn't jumped out, but Wright has been Miami's RB2 since Raheem Mostert lost a fumble a month ago. Wright himself lost a fumble this last week, but the rookie has flashed at times, and Mostert meanwhile has looked like a 32-year-old back. Devon Achane remains the Dolphins' clear RB1, but he's suffered multiple injuries throughout his brief career. He's now seeing a heavier workload. Miami's offense leads the league in EPA per play since Tua's returned from his injuries. The Dolphins are averaging the second most points per drive over that span. So there's fantasy upside in this offense should Achane go down, making Wright well worth stashing, and he's available in 94% of Yahoo leagues.
I agree. He is one of the better running back stashes out there right now. My large priority player, because I think you can get him off the wire at 6% rostered and potentially start him this week, is Adonai Mitchell. If Josh Downs does not go, and it sounds like it might be at least this week that he's going to miss with a shoulder injury, I think Mitchell becomes a starter for the Colts for sure. We last saw when Michael Pittman was out in week 10, Mitchell played 94% of the snaps, 6 catches on 6 targets, and he looked pretty good doing it. I think that helping Anthony Richardson out should be the idea for the Colts going forward. And I think Mitchell's separation in press man situations, some of the ISO routes, could really be a helpful addition to the passing game to get Richardson's play smoothed out. I think we got to start developing some chemistry between these two guys. When he's been given opportunities, I think Mitchell has played well from an isolation standpoint. Production, another, situation, but we talked about all kind of the caveats in the Colts offense earlier. So I think Mitchell's a guy who can play. This could be a pretty intriguing matchup against a Patriots defense that plays a decent bit of man coverage, and that is Mitchell's specialty right now, is working those ISO routes against man coverage. So I like I like Adonai Mitchell, Dalton, to be a fantasy starter this week if Josh Downs doesn't go.
Yeah, Mitchell and Jatavian Sanders are my two favorite rookies under the radar that I just won in Dynasty. And Michael Pittman banged his shoulder up last week too, briefly left.
True.
So now Downs banged up and Pittman. So let's get Mitchell an opportunity. I'd love to see it.
Let's get Mitchell a full set of snaps and see what happens. This has been the Waiver Wire Connections on the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast presented by Spectrum. And Dalton, that is going to do it on today's show. I appreciate the hell out of you, buddy, and I hope you have a good Thanksgiving.
You too, man. Happy Thanksgiving to the Harmon family.
Right back at you, buddy. Appreciate you. That is going to do it for us today. On Wednesday, Sal Vetri will be with us as usual, but no data dump. We will just be doing a full slate preview of the Thanksgiving and the Black Friday games. Until then, we are out.